Hello everyone, welcome to the Book Report, a conversation with the most topical and trenchant authors of our time right here on MSNBC's digital home, Shift. On today's show, we are joined by one of the most accomplished historians of our time, who has put together a previously unknown history of the Underground Railroad. Much of the book focusing on the prevalence of that operation right here in New York City. The New York Times has called the book an invaluable addition to our history, and Eric Foner will be here to discuss that with us. But first up today, what does it take to turn a startup into a successful, viable company? Our first author conducted countless interviews and did extensive research to try to pinpoint exactly what it is that causes small startup companies to become huge, multi-million-dollar successes. Over 5 years, she canvassed the landscape of entrepreneurial ventures, making stops at places like LinkedIn, Chipotle, and JetBlue. Amy Wilkinson, a strategic advisor and senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School, is the author of The Creator's Code, the 6 essential skills of extraordinary entrepreneurs. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So why don't we start out just detailing for people who haven't read the book what those 6 qualities are. What does it take to become a great success?
Sure. So the 6 essential skills are: first, to find a gap, to see something that others don't see. Second, to drive for daylight, so to manage speed like a race car driver. Third, to fly the OODA loop, which stands for observe, orient, decide, and act.
I'm glad you described that.
Oh, right. And then the 4th, to fail wisely. So it's not about failing fast or failing forward. That's kind of Web 2.0. Now it's about being imperfect and honing resilience. The 5th is called network minds. So how would you bring brain power towards you to solve problems in new ways? And then the 6th is called give small goods.
Right.
So it's, how do you give small kindnesses or favors to unleash productivity?
So this is a digital show where people are watching this online, and we're doing that in a bigger company. So I'm interested in the fast rate of iteration.
Sure.
Fast pace of iteration. Failing quickly and failing, as you say, smartly. Is it easier for startups, for people who have an entrepreneurial bent, to do that more than sort of bigger companies? Is there something inherent in being a startup that allows you to embrace failure, risk, and learn quickly?
Sure. So people who start startups, right, they inherently are able to take on risk, and they have to move quickly. The 6 skills, however, and the creator's code, that's the code, it applies to anyone. And that's a really important point, because you can be a creator inside of a larger context, right? So inside of a big company, whether it's IBM or GE or NBC or any kind of a company, you can also create and scale ideas. So that's the main principle here.
Tremendous range of companies you talk to. LinkedIn, Spanx,
Right.
which is itself just a huge range. How were there real commonalities there, or were you going to each company looking for something different?
No. So the research set is 200 interviews, people who have scaled companies over 100 million in revenue. These are the kind of people we want to learn from, right? They are very successful. It's intentionally across industries. It's also across geographies. So it's not just a tech data set. We often hear entrepreneurs and everyone thinks there's somebody in a hoodie building an app, right? No, so we have Chipotle in the book, or Spanx, or Under Armour. And the idea is that all of these companies, all of these founders have these 6 skills. And then all of us can learn them and practice them. So that's kind of the aha of the research.
Right. And the scale part of this, as they're growing, startups can often get caught in that sort of entrepreneurial focus around the creator itself. Are there lessons of how they've adapted to growth? We're seeing, lots of stories. Some of them may be meaningful, some of them not. For instance, about Uber as it goes through its tremendous growth here. Do they all trip up in the same way? Do creators trip up in the same way?
Well, all of us make mistakes, right? And that's part of failing wisely, is that we will blunder. There will be things that don't work out. I wouldn't say that everyone fails in the same way, right? The point here is you don't want to fail catastrophically. You don't want to have some massive failure where then your company goes down. You want to have little, tiny, incremental failures that you learn from along the way. And you also don't want to continue to make the same failure over and over and over again. That would not be failing wisely, right? So you want to keep learning and having having different failures. So no, I don't think that there's a categorical everyone fails in the same way. I think we're going to experience life and our companies and starting ideas in different ways.
I was just at an event with Mary Meeker, and she said, there's a word for people who go from failure to failure to failure, and that's called failure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the point of this.
Right. Well, that would be failing stupidly, right? We want to be failing wisely.
Right.
So we want to continue to grow and learn and be resilient through those different setbacks.
I realize you talked to a lot of companies, but if you had to say, here's the great example for me in my research, the great example of someone who did it better than anyone else, which one company could you say, okay, that's the case study for what entrepreneurs today should want to be?
I love Kevin Plank out of Under Armour. So he was a walk-on fullback, University of Maryland, had somewhat of a comical problem, which was he was sweaty. He was just the sweatiest player, weighed down by his gear. And so he came up with a synthetic fabric by going to a fabric store and then finding a tailor and then basically designing what has been performance athletic apparel to wear under your uniform. I think he's super relatable. He's an everyman, right? So anyone could have an awkward problem or solve their own problem and come up with now a $2 billion global brand. So I think he really shows that it's accessible to anyone.
You're at Harvard. You're a strategic advisor. Do you get people saying to you, well, that's all very well, and the book's wonderful, but I'm living it in the real world. This isn't real to me. How do you cope with that? How do you say, no, this actually has practical benefits for you in your business?
Sure. Well, I actually want to say I've left Harvard and I'm going back to Stanford, right? So I'm teaching this class at Stanford Business School. Yeah, I'm moving to the West Coast. But it's very much the 6 skills. All of these people started just like you, like me, like my mother or a neighbor or anything else. They are very accessible to anyone who has a new idea. So I don't want people to look at this book and say, oh, there are all of these billionaires in the book and they're famous and we already know about Chipotle or whatever. Steve Ells at Chipotle is a great example of someone who is just a chef. He's a classically trained chef.
Right.
And it took a lot of little experiments to have a company as big as Chipotle. So it's a very accessible set of skills for anyone that wants to have a new idea that they could create.
Well, I think it is accessible, and I learned a lot from it. So this is also a book show for authors, and so we're going to get into what it is to be an author. We have the book report tradition, which is the pop quiz.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay. So I hope in your ample research, you said you have some people who did some research for you here. They told you about this bit, but what are you reading right now?
I love the Peter Thiel 0 to 1 book. I think that's a great book. I like reading some of the classics. So I like John Gardner's Self-Renewal book. It's been around for, 30 years. I think it's a really important thing to renew yourself at the beginning of any year. So we're at the beginning of a year. I like reading magazines. I like reading up-to-date information.
What's the best book you read, let's say, in 2014?
What is the best book I read in 2014? I like Reid Hoffman's book, The Alliance. I think Reid is a really thoughtful business leader, and I think that he is a public intellectual. I think that is talking about how we need to have alliances, whether it's an employee-employer alliance or whether it's a person-to-person colleague alliance. I think that's a really important concept.
Okay, we're going back into time here. The book that affected you most as a child, not as a teenager, but as a child.
Gosh. I love Catch-22 as a book. I just think it's funny.
Now that was as a child, not as it's a sophisticated book.
I don't know, I think I read that in 5th grade. I mean, would that be considered a child?
Oh, that's very impressive, I have to say. That's very impressive. Okay, so as a teenager? As
a teenager, what would be maybe Catcher in the Rye? I mean, I'm an English major, so...
How do you move from English major to the business side of things then?
So I'm an English major. I have a sociology master's degree, and that's an important thing. I think I'm fascinated with people and stories, but I'm really fascinated with business people. So I'm an MBA, and I have had some business jobs,
I'm feeling so inadequate right now.
But I really am curious about people and what drives them, and in the business context in particular, I think we have to start companies, and it's this personal quest to start and scale ideas.
Do you see learnings from the literature side of things, though, to what you currently do? Can literature help you understand people?
Of course. So I believe very strongly that we only experience what we have in our own lives. If you read a book, same thing, if you go to a movie, you can drop into a whole nother world for the hours in which you are reading that book or seeing that film. So I think it's very insightful to just having a rich life, basically.
Cool. Okay, so your literature studies weren't entirely useless. What about as a book, as an adult, rather? What book affected you most as a grown-up?
I mean, I think John Gardner's self-renewal book is a fabulous one. And I think, it talks quite a lot about after you've been in your career for a certain period of years, 10 or 15 or 20 years, you have to keep growing and learning, and you have to renew. You can't simply think that you made it, right? Or you can't simply think that you didn't make it.
Right.
The idea is that you continue to upgrade and be curious and think about new things in new ways.
That's very true. Your favorite author of all time?
Oh gosh, I won't answer that. I mean, I think
you can't. Yeah, you can't say come here and not answer that. That's the point of this. You have to answer the question.
My favorite author of all time.
I won't check next week. You can change your mind.
I don't know. I mean, I really think everyone has a different idea to bring. I think.
Very disappointing. I've got to say, very disappointing. Where
I can't single out one author. I feel like I want to learn from everyone.
Okay, what about the most underrated author for you?
Most underrated author. Again, I think there's something to learn from almost. You can take one nugget out of almost any book. Some books you can take many off.
Someone who doesn't get the recognition they deserve.
I actually think some of the business authors are like that. I think, I think that Reid Hoffman, while I've said that his two books, The Startup Review and The Alliance, I think that maybe those don't actually circulate and feel as practical and tactical and tangible as they should.
Because they're seen too narrowly as business.
I think they're seen as tech, and I think they're seen as startup Silicon Valley only. And I think that like a lot of the lessons that Reid talks about are again across sectors and across industries.
Okay, so let's see how you do. Also singling out another author, an author whose success you least understand. So a bestseller, everyone's raving about, and you've picked up the book and said, it doesn't do anything for me.
Gosh, I mean, like these negative, I mean, I think, again, every book has something to say.
So positive. I can't deal with this kind of positivity in the morning.
I don't know. I mean, I really do. I think that there are different books that I think, oh, that's one theme only. And I think that this has 6 skills in it, right? So I think that, there's the one-hit wonder going on. And that's less interesting to me than a comprehensive set of multiple ideas that you can learn from.
Okay. You could have said, who moved my cheese? But that's okay. Okay, your favorite word?
Curiosity.
That's a great word. I like it. The most frequently misspelled word for you?
That I misspell? Gosh, I don't know. I have spell check. What do I
thing that spell check keeps going, again? Really? For me, it's like accommodate. I always get that one wrong.
Really?
Yes.
Well, maybe I will choose yours. Accommodate.
Accommodate. Okay, I'm going to stop prompting you. And lastly, the book you wished you had written.
The World is Flat. I think that came out while I was in the White House. I was doing international trade and economics. I think that it made trade very accessible, and the ordinary person could think about some economic concepts in real life ways. I think that was a valuable book. When
you think about trade from that high level perspective, your book is really trying to make it practical for entrepreneurs. How do you scale from one to the other? I mean, it's the trade deals you'd have been discussing, these big global trends in business are seem to have an indirect impact on entrepreneurs. I'm interested in your journey from one to the other. Has it been interesting? Did you learn things about global trade by looking at it from an entrepreneur's perspective?
Sure. So every big macro trend is driven by people, right? And so the big tie here is an entrepreneur, one person can make a difference. That's the idea of a capitalist economy, right? And there's some romance to that, one person can truly start and scale something that becomes a global company. Now, it takes a lot of other people joining in that vision, but when you look at trade or international economics, really the story is about the people behind the businesses that then can buy, sell, trade, interact, build alliances. I mean, that's the important point, is that it's really just people that start and end these, concepts.
I couldn't agree more. Amy, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
It's been fascinating. Amy Wilkinson's book, The Creator's Code, is about the 6 essential skills of extraordinary entrepreneurs. You're watching the Book Report right here on MSNBC's Shift. We'll be right back.